Alright, let's go on to episode 5 of season 4 of Fargo, which is called The Birthplace of Civilization, aka surely the episode Chris Rock was waiting for. I was talking about in the last video that Lloyd was really starting to kind of crack a bit more than we had seen, because we've been used to that cool demeanor that he had under all that tension and pressure, but this is a big episode for Chris Rock. And I think the thing about it also that works is he does get really big moments, and he does get to go on tirades and have big blow-ups and stuff like that, and be really super threatening. But at the same time, despite all of that, he's still like playing chess as opposed to shoot 'em up. Which I think says so much about his character, where it's like, you can say that it looks like that cool that we know is kind of cracking, but it's like, it's still there underneath. It's just like, we're kind of getting to see his more ruthless side in much more kind of theatrical ways. But as far as the way he does business, that's not changing. So this is a character that got significant... I mean, he was always an interesting character, but he's getting, like, significantly more, like, he draws you in the more this is going on now. And I feel like this episode really put that over the top. And we kind of immediately get that when we see this sort of thing going on where Josto's trying to prove something to Gaetano by having all these different portions of Kanan's guys arrested in various places, thanks to his involvement with Otis. And when it gets to Otis being face-to-face with Loy himself, the way he intimidates him in a very similar fashion that we saw him intimidate Rabbi in the last episode. And it's like, when you think about everything he said to Rabbi and now everything he says to Otis, one of the things that was just kind of, I didn't really notice until this episode, was another thing that makes Loy so intimidating is he seems to just know fucking everything. Like, these things that seem like they'd be impossible for anybody outside of any of this to know. But he can just see through everybody. It's like he knows everybody's, like, darkest secrets. And so seeing him intimidate people with this kind of stuff and this kind of knowledge is really coming through. And that's kind of leads us in an interesting direction later, when we get a Deafy Otis scene and we see where Otis has been kind of a comedy relief character up to this point, where he's kind of doing the sort of quirky thing, and of course his OCD thing, but the thing here is that we get two different sides and two different perspectives from the same story, where it's what Loy says to Otis in regards to when Otis was in the war, and then Otis relays this exact same story to Deafy, but we get his side of it and why that happened, which I thought was a really nice reveal, and is an interesting thing to kind of put another layer into Otis's character that hasn't been quite there yet. So I'll be interested to see a lot more of what Jack Houston can do throughout this. But continuing on the different things going on with Loy, there is obviously the fact that not only has there already been kind of building tension with his wife because of the whole Satchel situation, but now the fact that Lemuel and all the others have been arrested, his home life isn't quite as laid back as it seemed in that first episode, where it was like there's definitely tension because of the sun switch situation, but it's still kind of felt like a normalcy to it in a way. And this just sort of feels so broken, especially with his mother-in-law there, kind of making silent comments. And it's that comment on his, that comment to his mother-in-law right before the scene ends, after the blow-up has happened, is like, just completely pure Chris Rock. But I love that he can put in those Chris Rock moments without breaking character as Loy at all. And it seems like there'd be some sort of contrast there. But it just blends so perfectly, where it's like, at the start it might have almost seemed like he was maybe somewhat of a, like them intentionally trying to cast somebody you wouldn't expect, but then it's like, the more it goes on, the more it feels like the character was just made for him, and how natural it feels. So that's just getting better and more intriguing. and we have, because eventually we have to have an equal to him, because we have two sides to this potential oncoming war, and that would be Josto. And we've been talking about how, especially in like the second episode, I think I talked about how Schwartzman seemed a bit uncomfortable in the role compared to how natural Rock felt, even back then. But then as he's kind of seemingly eased into it, like he's easing into it at the same time Josto is, like we talked about in the last episode, something did kind of dawn on me that I kind of touched on in the last episode, that's about where Josto stands in regards to intimidation and his place in power. Where, yeah, he's doing the thing where he really took control, and he did the thing where he's having everybody arrested, basically just to prove a point to his brother, will also kind of keep things in his favor. But then we get moments where he is intended to be intimidating, and we kind of got that moment where he seemed very unintimidated when he pulled the gun on Gaetano in the last episode. And now here we kind of get another scene where he seems to be totally unintimidated, and that is when he goes to visit Cannon's guys while they're in jail. And he gets this big monologue, he like pantomimes shooting people up, and he gets to say all the big grand things and then make a grand exit. It's like you can almost, like, he almost seems like he's finally in his element until you realize, well, yeah, he was unintimidated by Gaetano in the last episode because he had a gun on him, which we kind of mentioned. And then this time around, he's able to do this big grand thing in front of the Cannon guys. Probably because they're behind bars at the time. So it's like, take some of his stuff away from him. Like, there's the inevitable confrontation with him and Gaetano that surely has to happen at some point. But I'm thinking ahead to he and Loy are going to be coming to blows surely at some point. And it's like the way Loy's able to play chess the way he does and get to people the way he intimidated Rabbi or intimidated Otis. And it's like, if Josto's going to be face to face with that, like when Loy's doing that at full force, I don't think Josto stands a chance. He still feels a little bit too drunk on his power without realizing that he might still be a bit too small in this when he doesn't have something to protect him. So it'll be very interesting to see if Josto either crash and burn, or there's the thing I think is likely, which is if he is able to take Gaetano out of the picture himself, that'll give him the confidence to be able to go up against somebody like Loy, single-handedly. So I'm interested to see how that goes, because we do get moments here where the scene with Rabbi and Josto, where Rabbi's kind of starting to plant the seeds, complete with math analogies, because he's still being the father figure to Satchel and teaching him long division, and he's planting the seeds that Gaetano has to go. So then we get another side to that, and we see the continued closeness of him and Satchel, which clearly isn't just for show for a number of reasons, but here specifically he alludes to the fact that he's planting the seeds by Gaetano now, and so he's saying now, if something goes down and people start shooting each other, me and you, Satchel, we're gonna vanish together in some way, which gives me pause, particularly about Rabbi, because it's the case of usually when you hear about plans like this, like plans to leave before it gets bad, typically the trope is that those plans don't have time to come to fruition, and they end up getting caught up in the bad. So I mean, it could be him. If that should be the case, I guess honestly it could be either him or Satchel, because something's gotta, well, obviously something already does potentially push Loy over the edge by the end of this episode, but depending on where the season goes, exactly how much blood is going to be shed is going to be the real question. And usually when you're in like that sort of gangster genre, you're in the gangster genre on top of being in the world of Fargo. There's undoubtedly going to be so much blood before this is over. So much blood and so many bodies. So things are really tensing up in a way that's really got me pulled in. And yeah, talking about, I've been kind of brushing off the idea of Gaetano being a threat. Because he certainly is, but he's also getting really big in nature really fast. He already started off, like the first time I saw him, I mentioned in the second episode's video that it feels like a pretty clear homage that he's doing John Polito in Miller's Crossing, which of course was the really loose cannon violent character in that, but ended up kind of being like John Polito's end in Miller's Crossing was so anticlimactic because it was Bernie, the Totoro character, that was like really the big thing behind it all. And that's kind of I'm kind of getting that similar vibe with Gaetano also, where it's like, yeah, he seems big and bad now, but he's like such a loose cannon that's surely gonna come back to bite him. And another reason I think that is because I was getting serious Tommy DeVito vibes in this scene where he's in the restaurant and he kills the dudes and he's like being really theatrical and dancing about it, and it's like that is such a Tommy DeVito killing Spider in Goodfellas moment. And we realized that there was still a good third of Goodfellas left when Tommy met his end, so that might be a loose fraction, but you get the idea. The third act still hadn't come yet when Tommy bit it, so I feel like Gaetano was kind of in that same area when comparing him to both Tommy and Johnny Casper from Miller's Crossing. That's where I'm thinking that character's headed. But the question is, how much blood is going to be shed under him before it's all said and done, if he should be taken out early. So we'll see. And once again, obviously, the last scene of this. But before we get to that, another thing going on here that feels like it's kind of bubbling a little bit is that we're starting to see, because Ethelreda seemed like in a very good, steady place in the first episode, and we were talking about how like she's like the moral center that you often see in like other Coen Brothers movies, like Marge Gunderson or something like that. Like a moral center that has to surround all the really shitty, dangerous people. And the problem here is that she's really playing with fire now, it seems, in a couple of ways. She has decided to react to this revelation about Jessie Buckley by writing to Dr. Harvard and telling him what's up in a certain way. That seems a bit, I don't know, because especially when Shirley, we didn't really get Jessie Buckley in this episode apart from that really great shot of her as the title was shown, and then we just didn't get any of her. So we're still left up in the air about the fucking notebook. That's really, if I was somebody that bit their nails, I wouldn't have any left. Just on that plot point alone. But on top of that, also she was hanging out with Zelmer and Swanee, and Zelmer and Swanee seemed to really be like kind of glorifying the whole outlaw image to her. We kind of got that vibe carried over a little bit when she got a little standoffish with Deffy when she was kind of put in the position, and it's cool to see her like stand her ground, but like I said, it feels like she's still maybe a bit too naive to be going down the Zelmer Swanee path, and it seems like she's destined for so much greater things that I'm hoping this doesn't lead to any sort of tragedy, but it does end up leading to the scene where, once again, the idea of Loy playing chess here. We have the scene where he goes to Thurman's house to confront him about that last scene in the last episode. And kind of on this also, it's like I mentioned that Jessie Buckley's been one of my favorite characters and the one I'm really interested in and to see where it goes. Yeah, Loy owned this episode so much. It wasn't until like right at the very end I even realized that Jessie Buckley was so absent from this episode. Like that's how much this was like the Chris Rock show, this episode. But when he goes, and like I was talking about where he doesn't necessarily blow up in the way we expect, because he's still cooler than that, but he's like right there. Like we can imagine what him blowing up might look like just by the way he talks to Ethelreda's parents in this scene. It's like it's one of the most threatening ways anybody's ever told somebody to go get cake. It's like it's a perfect follow up to him telling his wife to go get him coffee, and it's just him ordering for things to ingest. It's like its own level of threat, just based on his delivery and just those cold looks that he can give, like we saw this, and these looks that are even more intense than that eternal one from the last episode. And then the whole idea that he's, looking for information to make him stronger rather than just offing people. And it's like that's what makes him feel really ahead of the game. And even though Josto's been really smart up to this point about not killing people either, it is going to hinder him having Katana around for a while. So we'll see how that plays out. But it feels like Loy is way ahead right now, especially in all of his different game plans. And I loved how we also got that moment when Ethelreda did eventually give things up to Defi, and we got the sort of not to the extent, but kind of that Silence of the Lambs fake out when it kind of felt like that Loy was still in the room when Defi was practically on the other side of the door, and it's like that was an amazing buildup of tension cutting back between those two things. Even if that Silence of the Lambs bit, where it seems to be two things colliding and then they're actually in different places thing, may seem a little played out, but it works on me so often. So it's so I'm not sick of it yet. But yeah. Then we get our last scene, where one of my concerns in the last video did come true about Timothy Oliphant and Glenn Turman being in the guest starring portion as opposed to the regular cast. Made me afraid that their screen time might be limited, or their season time might be limited. And we lost Dr. Senator already, who was kind of more of a major character than Defi at this point. Where, like I said, if you didn't know any better watching them, like in the early episodes, you'd almost wonder why the positions of power weren't switched between Dr. Senator and Loy, until we got to see Loy better. But yeah, this is going to throw a wrench in things. This was, like I said, we were getting closer and closer to Loy's boiling point, but he's been real smart about his gameplay up to this point. This may fuck all that up. And I also thought it was very interesting how it was almost kind of a fake out where, especially when you think back to the restaurant scene when Gaetano killed the two dudes, the fact that he shows up here instead of the consigliere, and it's Calamita who's kind of talking to him, and Gaetano's just lurking in the background, just eating his fucking ice cream and being really sinister, and it's like, because we know what he's capable of all the way up to the extent we saw in the previous scene, we know Dr. Senator is in danger here, especially since he's outnumbered 2-1. When Gaetano's about the equivalent of having 3 people in one. The kind of suddenness of it, that it's Calamita's the one that pulls the trigger on him as opposed to Gaetano, since we are so expecting of Gaetano to be the violent one. So now Calamita is much more at the front of this than he kind of seemed. Where it's almost like it was almost like in the branding scene at the beginning of the last episode, like he was kind of intimidated into place. But no, it seems to have only hardened him even more. And it's I mean, of course, he was the one that almost took the initiative and killed Lemuel, but before Rabbi stopped him. But it feels like he's much more dangerous even then. Like he just seemed like kind of a side guy back then. But now, to the point that I couldn't even remember his name when I did that video. But now it's like really coming forward. There's a lot of characters kind of coming forward now. So I'll be really interested to see where this goes. And yeah, we did get to see the dude from season 2 really briefly in his. I was gonna mention the fact that the truck said Treehorn Trucking, obviously a reference to Jackie Treehorn, but I could have sworn we've seen that before in one of the previous seasons. Like I feel like I remember a reference to the Treehorn name in one of the previous seasons, if not multiple ones, but I don't know. But yeah, so all those other, Coen Brothers homages, go ahead. Some of them are pretty heavy-handed and obvious, but it's alright. So, yeah, so a lot of interesting things going on here now, and I'm really hooked on Loy's, like, just the way he works now, even more so, and how the hell he's going to react to the death of Dr. Senator, and assuming we're going to bring Jessie Buckley back, I'm starting to wonder if, since that character has gotten so much attention before, and we're really playing into how dangerous she is, and how insane she is, if the fact that she's almost entirely missing from an episode means that we're going to double down on that in the next one. So a lot of things to look forward to in the two characters I'm really keeping an eye on in this season. It's gonna be it's this is what I love when it comes to TV shows, where especially when they're already over and I can just watch them back to back without having to wait a week, is being this excited for every new episode. And to really know, because that I feel like that's missing a lot, and why I'm not as into TV as I am like the instant gratification of movies. But this is like, yeah, I'm just really really sold on this season. I'm really into it, and unless it like really fucks itself in the second half, um, I, I don't know, but I feel like this. I still don't know if I'm as excited as I was about season one, but we'll see. Like I said, we're pretty much right at the halfway point, with there being 11 episodes now instead of 10. So like what is it? Halfway through the next episode we'll be halfway through. So yeah, so I'm very excited to get to that. So until then, that's it for this.